Hi guys, Bally here. Welcome to a very special episode. This is my Japan special that myself and my girlfriend Caroline recorded while we were in Japan. I'd like to just say that we did use my voice recorder when we were on the go, so the sound quality is not quite the usual, TNL high quality, but Hopefully it sounds all right. I've had to fiddle with it and adjusted volumes and things like that, so it should sound okay. I'd also like to apologize for getting so many Japanese names wrong. I think I get better by the end of the episode, but yeah, that's a big weakness of mine. I need to work on that. I just wanted to also plug the fact that we also did some vlogs as well as posted loads of images. So I'd highly recommend checking out my Twitter account for those images and those vlogs. I'm at Ballyman91, that's Ballyman 91, to go and check out that. And then Caroline also posted loads of pictures, so she wanted to plug her Instagram, which is Caroline Runs 26.2. No prizes for guessing that she's into running marathons like myself. So yeah, on with the show. Hope you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the very first audio log of my trip in Japan with my girlfriend Caroline. It's Bally here. I hope you're all doing well. I'm quite tired, so my voice is quite quiet. Perhaps we've been out for dinner. We're currently staying in. Let me get this right. Asukusabashi.
Asakusabashi.
Thank you, Caroline. That was Caroline's audio debut. Caroline, how are you doing? How are you finding Japan?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm extremely excited to be here. Feeling pretty jet lagged and quite confused about what day it is right now. And I lost my ankles during the flight, so...
What lost your ankles? What does that mean? What is going on?
Well, since getting to the hotel and finally having a shower after about, 15 hours of travelling, I've discovered I no longer have any ankles. So I've got my compression running socks on, doing some stretches, legs up against the wall. I'm expecting to have ankles back soon.
So we should be clear that neither of us have ever been to Japan before. I keep making this point. I've never been further east than countries like Malta in Europe. You've been to both South Korea and a couple of places in China. Mm-hmm. We've only been here a day, but what would you say?
Not even.
Well, yeah, not even a few hours. What would you say stands out the most just from initial impressions? It's very initial impressions.
Well, I would first say we haven't really seen Tokyo, the main part of Tokyo yet. I think our area is on the east of the city, but our area, which seems perfectly interesting, is
10 minutes from Akihabara.
Oh yeah, happy coincidence. But it's extremely quiet, is my first impression. Very clean, very orderly. I mean, plenty of people around, I would say. It's not as though there's no one on the streets, but everyone just seems to be nice and respectful, just getting on with their thing, whatever their day is.
Yeah, I found it surprisingly easy to get from the airport to our hotel. We've got a 21-day bullet train pass, which also gets you access to any... What is it? GRV? What's the...
GR, Japan Rail.
JR, okay, JR, Japan Rail, which gets you on pretty much any train apart from the underground metros in Tokyo. So we've been using overground trains essentially, and it's all quite easy, and everyone is really, really helpful. Mm-hmm. And I just absolutely love it so far. Like it was a really long way to get here. I think
There's a reason why that flight was cheaper than the others.
Yeah, because it goes to Abu Dhabi, which is just like
Not the most direct route.
Yeah, quite a cramped, fast turnaround. I mean, it was nice that it was such a fast turnaround. In one sense, it was only about 2 hours or slightly less.
It was stressful.
So we were going from a 6-hour plane, 2-hour turnaround, quick bowl of ramen in the airport, and then straight onto a 9-hour flight. It felt very intense, and I've never really done anything like that. The furthest I've been otherwise was direct to Los Angeles. Well, not direct. I think I did London, New York. I can't remember. But anyway, that's a while ago. So it's a pretty long way, and it feels like a long way. What are our general plans going to be the next few days? We're just going to have a gentle explore. A wander around. We're in Tokyo, I should say, for about 4 days, so lots more to see and do.
Yeah, that's right. I think we've been pretty good at organising our hotels and travel, but we've got a vague idea of itineraries. I'm a big running and a big beer fan, as is Bally, so I'm hopeful that tomorrow will include some running. Let's see if we survive the humidity, because it's really hot here, and I want to...
Yeah, it's very humid.
But once we do survive that, I want to explore the beer culture as well.
The beer culture.
Well, and of course Japanese culture too. And lots of food.
Yeah, exactly. So
we're here on an eating holiday.
Yeah, pretty much. We did sushi tonight.
It was delicious.
Lots going on. I've been tweeting pictures. Yeah, good. So I think we've done like a general wrap-up of our first impressions. From day one, you can say. I'm not going to do an audio log every day, but I'm just going to do one here and there when we've done something interesting, or when I think there's something interesting to say. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. Speak to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.
And we're back. This is the second segment of the Japan audio logs that myself and Caroline are recording. We thought we are currently actually in Hakone, having spent time in both Tokyo, Central Tokyo, and Tokyo Disneyland. But it's been a few days since we last recorded, so we thought we'd go back and talk a few points through on what we thought about Central Tokyo, where we were staying. We were staying at what was the name of the area?
Asakusabashi.
Asakusabashi, or in Japanese they say Asakabashi. Asukabashi.
Something like that.
They miss out an extra asa or something. Anyway, we thought we'd just go through sort of what we thought, what surprised us, and obviously I'm sure you're here to hear about what we thought of Akihabara, which was incredible. But first of all, we thought we'd talk about some of the cultural quirks. So we were there for 4 nights. We thought we'd mention some of the cultural quirks and some of the less expected things that we noticed. Are there any things straight off the top of your head, Caroline, that you want to say, wow, that was really unexpected, I didn't realize the Japanese did that or were like that, or what? Anything instantly?
Well, I would say sort of the Japanese already have this reputation, I suppose, for being a very orderly and polite and, not a particularly noisy population. But I would say it's even more exaggerated when you get here than I thought. For instance, I've barely seen any rubbish on the streets in Tokyo. I've seen people accidentally drop a tissue and go back and pick it up. Levels of tidiness on the street that you would never in a million years see in the UK. I think we mentioned already, but people on the street, they're quiet, they keep themselves to themselves. On the trains as well, going around Tokyo, people might have conversations, but in general, there's not really much noise being made. People queue very orderly to get onto the trains. You don't need to worry someone's going to push past you.
I would say that whenever we're on a train and there's any noise, it's either kids or like teens in groups and things. Like it's never ever like over 18s making any noise, like even in conversations one-on-one or anything. All public transport is so orderly. Crowds at stations are incredibly careful to not cross in front of you, get in each other's way. They're still incredibly like fast and efficient and want to get to work, want to get home at the end of the day, but they don't kind of barge their way home. I would say that a lot of people in the UK might they will let you pass, and if they whenever there's an incident like you do bump someone by accident, or say they have like a young child with them who gets in your way by accident, they're always incredibly apologetic about like how it happened, and like and it's sort of this bowing thing that always happens when you say hello and goodbye. It's also there in restaurants and things. And thank you. It's always bowing, and then that sort of thank you and I'm sorry is sort of what they say if like you brush them by accident. Like it's really interesting.
I would say the only time they're a bit more argy-bargy is when everyone needs to get on the train, and then it seems legitimate to push you. But as you pointed out, Bally, it's not a shove like you'd get in the UK. It's this gentle pressure to make you get
it's like a gentle pressure that's sort of mutually agreed between a group of people all pushing very sort of steadily but forcefully and slowly as you're sort of being compressed into the middle of the train, which is very unusual. What's another point? Go ahead.
I was going to say, in a restaurant, so you arrive in a restaurant and they're very quick to show you to a table, and almost either while you're still stood up, or I guess maybe more often once we've sat down, you're given hot towels to wipe your hands with. And our first night when we went to that lovely sushi restaurant, we sort of wiped our hands on the towels and then just left them to the side, sort of expecting them to be cleared away, and sort of realised throughout that meal that actually people keep using the towels throughout the meal. They use it to mop their faces or if they need to wipe their hands, and that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, people generally just carry around like rags and things to wipe.
Towels. Rags.
No, I've seen others with like rags and things tied around necks and things just to like wipe their face, and when it's incredibly hot. And
well, it's a very sweaty culture. I guess it's new to us because we come from a cold island, but people always have these towels on them because, and it seems perfectly, like socially acceptable, which makes sense because if you're sweating the whole time you're outside, it's much more considerate of others that you carry a small towel with you than you just sort of walk around dripping like we do. So that was
it's very humid. It's sort of
crazy.
I would say like Florida levels of humid and beyond in terms of how wet you get just from walking around at an orderly pace.
Yeah.
Another thing about commuting we noticed was like the vast majority of commuters, and maybe because it's summer, people are commuting a bit earlier and later, sort of going home a bit earlier, going to work a little later, but there's still obviously the big rush hour at sort of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. It's sort of like a 12-hour day. That's when the rush hours are broadly in Tokyo. The vast majority of commuters are male, and like you obviously do see women on the public transport, but they often either don't look like they're going to work or from work, or the few that are going to work are definitely a minority of, I would even argue, like 30-20% and under. Like it's really interesting.
Yeah, I was a little bit prepared for that. My guidebook said that it's such a man's world here for the career ladder. But like you said, it's really noticeable to see which, that's a shame, but no great surprise. The one hilarious element to it is that the men all seem to have this uniform for they're all dressed almost exactly the same.
Yeah, like ties are out, stripy like pattern shirts are out. It's mainly white shirts, occasionally like a blue shirt or something, but it's always like plain. And sleeveless often. We also notice a lot of the guys, even in this humid heat, are wearing vests under their shirts. It's like
that blew your mind.
That completely blew my mind. And yeah, are there any other points you want to cover that?
Well, just seeing as we just mentioned clothing. So, for instance, I knew that Harajuku in Tokyo is supposed to be the really sort of zany fashion area, and it's where a lot of the really outlandish Japanese styles came from. So I thought, oh, well, we'll see some really crazily dressed people when we go there, but the rest of the time, would be relatively regular dress sense. But actually, the whole of Tokyo, people dress up. Obviously not everyone, but for instance, Akihabara also, it was more noticeable, I think. And it's some people might have just amazingly different coloured hair, or they're really dressed up. One thing I don't love is the schoolgirl look is really big here, and so we've seen plenty of girls dressed up as schoolgirls.
And it's hard to judge their ages, but I would judge that girls ranging from the age of 14 to 28, 30 and beyond.
Probably not beyond.
Maybe not beyond that, but like dress in this sort of similar look. And it's quite clear that like many of those who are of schoolgirl age are not going to school in that uniform. They are just, because it was the weekend at times, like they would just be wearing that as with like groups of friends and things because it was like trendy or whatever. And
they all dress the same as well. I mean, with the schoolgirl look, it kind of makes sense, but you'd see them matching down to the last detail quite often. And with other types of dress as well, they'd try and be quite similar, either couples or even just it's a good way to show that you really care about your friends to all wear the same clothes.
So are there any more points you want to cover on sort of some of the quirks that we've thought about? No. Anyway, moving on to food. Probably my most anticipated part, potentially, or if not up there, was the food in Japan generally. And our 4 days in Tokyo, we really ate like a lot of really good food and at really great prices. Just off the top of my head, we did some sushi, we done ramen, some like katsu curry. What else have we?
More sushi, onigiri.
Yeah, plenty of onigiri. So like, Caroline, what are some of your favorite foods and things that shocked you about the food?
To be honest, all of it is. The most shocking thing is how great it has all been, and like Bally just said, the prices have been incredible. The freshness and the quality is just insane. Also, the fact something that's really popular here are bento boxes. So it's essentially just buying your packed lunch from a counter with, it could be sushi or sashimi, or it's rice with various curry or anything like that. And even the quality of that is fantastic.
And it's all super healthy. And I was just shocked that like in Asakusabashi and plenty of districts of Tokyo we visited, the sheer quantity of food places and I don't mean like big chain restaurants or necessarily like
or even big restaurants.
It's just sheer huge numbers of small independent places that just like, I'm gonna have a ramen shop, and it's just like a tiny little shop with maybe as few as like 8 to 12 seats in many of them.
Yeah.
And then you've got like one or two chefs who you can often see, and it's like a block of land that's almost like in a shoebox, and the kitchen is just facing essentially the tables and chairs, and it's maybe like one or two waitresses, and it's just so small and affordable, and they just stack huge numbers of these tiny little food shops back to back down like side streets and things, and like all over Tokyo we saw them. Like the range of food was just unbelievable.
Also, the fact that we didn't book anywhere, but more than that, we didn't even look anywhere up. We just followed our noses, and we weren't let down once. And I mean, our criteria, because we don't speak any Japanese and definitely don't read any characters, kanji.
Kanji, I believe, yeah.
And but so we weren't necessarily looking for places with English menus, but just with pictures of the food. I don't eat meat, so that was just one thing to kind of try and look out for. Before this holiday, I didn't really eat much fish, but you absolutely have to eat fish here. It would be extremely difficult to be a strict vegetarian.
One thing I learned is that the term ramen actually means that it has to be in either pork or beef stock, and that if it's not in either pork or beef stock, they call it something else. It's essentially, I don't know, I can't remember the name for it, but essentially ramen means pork or beef stock.
Yeah, and when we went to that lovely ramen restaurant, and the guy double-checked that we were okay with pork stock, and I wasn't. So I had the one vegetarian ramen, and it still tasted nice.
He did offer you beef in between. He said, "Oh, you can't eat pork. Why don't you have beef?"
Yeah. He was nice. But it's essentially like one step up from having a boiled water soup with vegetables in it. It wasn't bad. It was definitely still flavorful, but compared to the other food, like that wasn't great.
Yeah, but generally, like we said, the food has just been unbelievable. And like there are some chains we've not really, I think we might have been in a couple of chains by accident. I certainly can't remember the name of those chains, but there's sort of like a couple of curry chains. We were going to go in one, but they had like 0 non-pork options, so we avoided that. Well,
that's one other thing we learned, is that you can't seem to get a katsu curry without pork here.
Yeah, it's all this sort of, in the UK, it's always, katsu curry always comes with the breaded chicken. Here, it's always the breaded pork. It's like a pork schnitzel. Like anywhere you go, always pork in the katsu curry. Loads of tempura about, like tempura prawns. Really, like, absolutely huge ones that in the UK would cost you an arm and a leg. Here, it's just like standard, maybe 790 yen. So sort of like £5 or so for like absolutely top of the range seafood. And I've just been shocked generally at the amount of fresh tuna and like squid, and I even had like a sea urchin sushi, like really unusual seafood. And that's another thing. There's about 3, 4, 5 different cuts of tuna, from like the fattiest to the leanest, and they all taste slightly different. And I've like tried to eat a few of them, and it's really impressive. But these restaurants consider, like, whether it's salmon, squid, different types of tuna, they all cost the same. Whereas in the UK, like these fresh tuna, like the lean tuna, is way more expensive than the salmon and things like that. So like I'm just so impressed by the amount of fish and the low price that it is. Anyway, any more opinions or ideas, things you want to say about the food?
No, just that we've managed to eat at really reasonable prices without trying. I mean, you can tell when you're walking past a more fancy restaurant. And for instance, we haven't been into any like food counters at malls or anything. I don't know if that might be a bit more expensive. And we've gone for. But some of the places have had English menus, actually. So it's not as though we've avoided the ones that help tourists.
There have really been very few restaurants that either don't have an English menu or don't have a menu with pictures. And on top of that, we never feel like... maybe we could go back. This is linking to like the cultural part that we sort of skirted over. It's just... We've really noticed very, very few tourists and people from, you might say, from the West. And believe me, they stand out like a sore thumb, you might say. But there are honestly nothing like the number of Westerners as I thought there would be, even in the most touristy places. And when you go into restaurants, almost like 9 times out of 10, I should say, we are the only Westerners in there, and the staff are still unbelievably friendly. Everyone just really helps you out, like ordering what you want and working out what would work for you. And it just, works really well. Like it's just the food experience here is top notch and so affordable. Really incredible meals that we've had for like 15 quid total, like for both of us, and like great ramen bowls and everything. So yeah, food 10 out of 10. Couldn't be happier.
For anyone who is thinking about coming to Japan potentially, I really want to plug the Japan Rail Pass because I've travelled a little bit in Asia before. I've been to China and to South Korea, and I cannot get over how easy it is to travel here in Japan and the value of the Japan Rail Pass, because this is a pass that's only available to tourists, and I'm a little bit unsure whether you still have to buy it before you enter the country. You certainly did used to have to, but I saw a sign at one of their travel centres that seemed to imply they sold them there. But either way, if you're thinking about coming to Japan, absolutely look it up. It seems a little bit expensive. We bought the most expensive pass because we bought the 3-week one, but it's so worth it.
But it's worth it in the sense that, and don't mean to skip ahead here, but we are currently in Hakone, and the only transport we've bought other than our rail pass was the bus between, I can't remember the name. Odawara. There we go. Between Odawara and Hakone. That's all we've paid for in terms of transport. So your Japan Rail Pass gets you travel on all the overground trains in Tokyo.
Well, provided that they're run by the Japan Rail line, but it's so easy to tell.
Yeah, and they're clearly marked JR, like it's everywhere. We
got to Disneyland with it. We got to Odawara. We're gonna go from Odawara to Kyoto.
Exactly on the bullet train.
Yeah, bullet train as well.
It includes the bullet train, which is hugely important, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more shortly. But yeah, could not emphasize how easy it is, and you just flash these passes to any guards on gates, and they let you through.
And also just finally to add that you don't have to have reservations on the trains, but you can reserve seats, and you just go to these Japan Rail travel centres. They're in all the big stations, and they will even tell you how to do the route. So I wasn't sure how to get to Hakone. I just needed to tell them that the day we wanted to go, roughly what time, and they said, okay, you need this one. They reserved the seats for you, and it took minutes. It barely took any time at all, and we both live in Brussels, so having that level of service and kindness from someone who works in a train station was just blew my mind.
I like people don't tend to have tons of English, but they have all the English that really matters when you're trying to work out where to go. Like, people are great on stuff like numbers and timings and working out your change and little things like that. And they really are, and they can identify like how someone like us would pronounce the places, and they can identify where you're trying to go, what you're trying to do. And it's all just incredibly seamless.
And thoughtful.
It's really, really impressive. I can't emphasize enough how helpful and easy it's been in terms of logistics and getting around everywhere. But the final thing we wanted to talk about with Tokyo, and this was probably one of the most impressive parts of Tokyo, I certainly felt.
I enjoyed it too.
And Caroline, to my surprise slightly, actually had a really good time there as well, and that is Akihabara. So for those of you who aren't aware of the area of Tokyo that's Akihabara, it is essentially the electronic central of Tokyo.
It's the heart of geek culture, as my guidebook put it, which really annoys Bally.
Slightly annoyed me, and partly because I think it's a bit of an understatement as well. Like this, if you want to define someone who games a lot as a geek, it's not just a bit of a geek culture there. It goes way and far beyond anything you can imagine. The number of people dressed up in all sorts of gaming attire, the number of arcades, the number of shops, the number of electronic shops. We're talking like department stores of like 6, 7, 8, 9 floors of electronics. We went in an entire department store that all it did was video game PCs, like gaming PCs. You could buy, and each floor had like a different section for different parts you could buy for that PC.
And also just to say, one thing that's been really different here is their department stores, they can be actually in quite sort of narrow, almost apartment buildings. I mean, these are shops, but it just looks so different to how you expect. Like, there's been some massive department stores as how we would think of them, but also I'm sure Bally's gonna talk about Super Potato, but these are kind of like narrow and wookie places. And for instance, Super Potato started on the 3rd floor to the 5th floor, so sometimes you enter into buildings where it doesn't have a shop front even at all. In fact, I don't know, it's just quite unusual to us, I think.
Yeah, you really have to be looking, and I assume it's just because of the land value, basically. Like, people are just trying to get these shops, and like a lot of the shops have incredibly narrow corridors. There was one where I had to like duck the entire time I was in the shop, and like there was some parts of the shop I had like a bag on my back. I could barely fit through the through the corridor. I was WhatsApping MBZ about this, but it's when you're over here. And you do see, you see Zelda, you see Kirby, you see Dragon Quest, you see Pokemon, you see Yokai Watch, you see all the things we like know about Japan. And you think, oh, that's cool. It's really cool that they have all those things. But then there's just hundreds of thousands of other series and anime and video games and other stuff that the Japanese are into that I just have no idea about. And like, I knew there was a lot of it, but you don't really feel the sheer quantity of it all until you go into numerous shops in Akihabara which sell models and things that are just solely related to a single game. Akihabara just has so much of this stuff, and like, what I found just amazing was I know it's summer, but we went in like a weekday during the day. And there were just so many people there. Like, I was just like, I thought people were working now. What's going on?
Well, and it also seems like completely socially acceptable that someone on their lunch break, and I have to say, mostly men. I didn't really see. We saw a few women in the arcades, but not on their own. It seemed like it's quite a thing for these men in their shirts all dressed up.
I don't mean for stereotypes, but I would argue that more women potentially went to the grabbing machines.
No, I would agree.
Which there were a lot.
I really felt a bit sexist. Well, Japan just has so many stereotypes that it does live up to in terms of sexism and men and women's roles. And yeah, the arcades definitely felt like it. But you had men who were clearly in their like 30s, 40s, as well as teenagers. I'm sure probably even some older ones as well. But
there were just like plenty of businessmen like in arcades in their lunch breaks, and maybe finished early, who knows, but just like we were in like multiple arcades. I think the one we went to and we had a game of Mario Kart actually was a Sega arcade, and the top 3 floors are only fighting game arcades like Street Fighter, Tekken. This is where my fighting game knowledge lags behind, but
Japanese versions that look like Tekken.
Exactly. And Tekken is Japanese.
I know. But right. I mean other ones, like same.
Yeah. Like loads more fighting games that are just huge here that I had no idea about, and they were just mashing away. And
just one thing to say though, like, it was interesting to walk through these arcades, but apart from the fact it's not really my thing, I didn't find it very comfortable to stay in them for very long. They were so loud. There's no windows, which of course makes sense because of the screens, but so dark, like bright lights often or flashing, and the smoke.
Yeah, I was broadly prepared for sort of the loudness, the lights, the flashing, that sort of thing, how tight it felt. I was prepared for that, but I was not prepared, as you said, Caroline, for the smoke. Like, the arcades we were in, they had like smoking floors and non-smoking floors. I would almost argue that there were more smoking floors than non-smoking floors.
I'd agree.
And even the floors that didn't have smoking, often the smoke would just rise up from the other floors to the non-smoking floors. So
yeah, there were no ventilators or anything to try and extract it.
Yeah, so we only had one game of Mario Kart in the basement of one of the Sega arcades, actually.
I was up for more, but Bally wasn't because I beat him.
I was up for more, but Caroline did pit me to the post on the line. And it was a really great game, actually, Mario Kart Arcade. I know that Mario Kart Arcade is actually... there's a lot of those machines outside of Japan, obviously in the UK as well. I've just not seen any. I'm not the biggest arcade guy, you might say, but yeah, I just thought that the arcades were pretty tough to stay in for a long time, mainly because of the smoke, which is really interesting because generally Japan, people don't smoke much. You see a few people here and there on the come on, compared to Europe, a few people here and there on the street smoking.
Well, yes and no, but that's also because when you're walking around, there's these signs saying no smoking while walking. So people have to go to these designated smoking points. And I would say whenever we've walked past a smoking point, there's always people there smoking. And for instance, there was a restaurant we went in and we went upstairs so we could avoid the smoke. So I don't know, it's a weird one. It's almost like they don't want people smoking out in the public where it can annoy the public. But once you're in places like restaurants or the arcades, it's okay. It's just almost like the opposite of our attitude to the ban.
I still think that the number of people smoking is far reduced to especially France and Belgium in Europe.
Maybe.
But yeah, other things to say on Akihabara. Yeah, Super Potato. What a place. What a shop. If you haven't heard about it, Super Potato is just this like classic video games shop. I've posted loads of stuff on Twitter about it. I played the Virtual Boy there, got in a bit of Warrior Land on the Virtual Boy, which was really exciting. It felt just like, it feels a lot like looking at a 3DS screen actually. It's that same sort of style of 3D, but obviously in just the red and black. But yeah, really cool to try that out. Loads of classic games. Managed to pick up good old Fire Emblem 6 for MBZ thanks to Caroline.
Thank you.
who spotted it last minute after we'd given up looking through all the Game Boy Advance games that they had lying out. Caroline actually spotted it in a cabinet, and they had loads of copies of Mother 3 as well. I think they cost roughly like £40 to £50, or I think it was something like 7,000 yen, which I wasn't really prepared to do because obviously Nintendo are gonna bring that game over to the West. I know it's gonna come anytime soon now. Plus, I wasn't really in the mood for playing Mother 3 in Japanese, but there you go. But yeah, just loads of great stuff. I picked up a Splatoon squid, a green squid from Splatoon 2. It's got some Japanese on the back as well, so that's a nice.
It's a cushion.
It's a cushion. Oh, it's a cushion. It's a
cushion.
It can be a cushion. It's cool. Anyway, there's just loads of stuff like that in Super Potato. You can buy like an old SNES, GameCube, you name it, just anything, like you can pick it up there. And I read a lot of online saying that a lot of the prices were pretty unreasonable and you could find cheaper prices in the rest of Akihabara. It's like, yeah, maybe you can find cheaper prices in the rest of Akihabara, but good luck trying to find it because like Akihabara is huge. Like we barely scratched the surface of like video game shops and general Nintendo stuff.
Yeah, you'd absolutely have to speak Japanese if you wanted to do that, I think. I mean, maybe you could strike it lucky with some good research, but honestly, and Super Potato, even I enjoyed it, and I'm not much of a gamer, obviously, and it was cool. There were fun things.
Yeah, it was great, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. It's just a real, like, museum almost for classic games, mainly Nintendo stuff, which is always nice to see. But yeah, Akihabara generally, I really noticed tons of adverts for video games everywhere in Akihabara. Dragon Quest is huge here. Like, I knew Japan was obviously huge for Dragon Quest, but the adverts are just everywhere. And even at the metro station, there were like loads of adverts for Splatoon 2. There's like a new Pokemon film going, like a 20th anniversary Pokemon film I noticed. I want to see now, actually, which looks really interesting. Advertised in loads of places. And yeah, it's just incredible how mainstream, I think is the best way to describe it, how mainstream video games are to Tokyo and specifically Akihabara. It's not, yes, there are some stereotypes when it comes to who's sitting longest in the arcades, but when you're actually out on the street in Akihabara, it's all people of all ages and genders and sexes and everything there to, you know, pick up some merch and play some video games, which is very unique, I would argue, to Japan.
And actually, even wider than that, there was a lot of like collectibles for characters and stuff that weren't aren't necessarily even in video games. For example, there was quite a lot of Studio Ghibli, like My Neighbor Totoro characters and things like that. So personally, I'm a big fan. So there was even stuff there for me that I didn't necessarily expect we'd see at that point, and that made it really fun too.
Yeah, I didn't know much about this film, My Neighbor Totoro. I still need to watch it, but Caroline informs me, I need to look this up, but it's like a film from 1988, I believe, and to my knowledge, there's not been anything released since then, but the merch...
Oh, it's Studio Ghibli. We watched Spirited Away.
No, of course, but I mean, under like My Neighbor Totoro.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah.
So, like, it's this one film from, like, 88, and the merch for that one film still going today is incredible. I was also shocked at the amount of Star Wars stuff in Akihabara. There was absolutely loads of figurines and everything here. People are pretty Star Wars crazy over here. I think Akihabara, if you have any affinity to any video game ever, I think it's worth checking out. Just not as like just a fan of video games, but if you're just a fan of Japan, like it's such an important
cultural experience.
It's such an important side of their culture, and Akihabara really shows it off well. And I'd highly recommend checking it out. But yeah, Caroline, that was a few thoughts we had on our 4 nights in Tokyo. After Tokyo, we went to Disneyland, and we're going to talk about that in another segment. But are there any final thoughts you wanted to say on your 4 days in Tokyo? We are going to have one more night in Tokyo at the end of the holiday before our flight. But yeah, Caroline?
Yeah, just one final thing was that I've had, I believe, more than one person say to me that maybe we were staying in Tokyo for too long, and it seems like some people aren't the biggest fans. And actually, I mean, right now we are besotted with the place. I wish we could have been there a bit longer. Not that I wanted to take away from other things we're doing. I just, in general, would like to not leave Japan. But I absolutely loved it. And I don't know if that means that we're going to be even more blown away by other places. For instance, Hakone right now seems pretty awesome. But just... I don't know, don't be intimidated by it, because it always sounds like the size and the volume of people, and it's going to be so hectic, and it was so doable, it was easy. There's not all that much English, but there's English where it needs to be, like Bally was saying earlier, and it's not expensive once you're there. The expensive things here are accommodation and, you know, your flights and I guess the rail pass. But that's it. Once you're here, it's okay. Even I'm a big fan of zoos. Like, the zoo costs the equivalent of, like, I think £4 or £5. That's the zoo in Tokyo.
Yeah, like, this is an impressive zoo. We're talking lions, tigers, pandas. Elephants, pandas, yeah.
I mean, you try going to London Zoo for less than, what, 20 quid? You know, so, and also the National Museum, that was about 4 or 5 quid as well.
And it was like 4 or 5 huge buildings, of which we just did one.
Yeah, we barely scratched the surface.
So you could like return to that. You could spend over an entire week at that one museum at Ueno?
Yeah, Ueno.
Ueno Park. Which is a really beautiful park. And there were loads of shrines and things that we missed out on that we might try and hit next time. But if not, we will have to come back.
Well, and also we know we'll hit a lot of shrines in Kyoto, which is more the spiritual home of Japan.
So yeah, those are some thoughts on Tokyo, our 4 nights. And like I said, one more night later. But yeah, onwards and upwards. We'll be back with the next segment, which will be on Disneyland Tokyo. Goodbye, everyone. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another audio log from me, Bally, here in Japan with my girlfriend Caroline. So last time we talked a bit about Tokyo. After Tokyo, we went around the bay. It's sort of in Shiba, I believe, or just next to. We went to Disneyland Tokyo for 3 nights at the Hilton on the bay, or I believe it's called, or at the bay.
Tokyo Bay, Hilton Tokyo Bay.
Hilton Tokyo Bay. which is one of the resort hotels there at Disneyland, and we did 3 nights, 2 days in the parks. There are 2 parks there, Disney Sea and Disneyland. See what I did there, land and sea. And I have obviously never been to Disneyland Tokyo. I've been to Disneyland Paris, I've been to Disneyland California, I've been to Disney World. So I was really intrigued to see what Disneyland Tokyo would be like. Caroline, you've done like one day, a couple of days at Disneyland Paris a long time ago before?
Yeah, that's right. I think I was about 13, so a fair while ago now.
And yeah, we thought we'd give it a bash, so we got our 2-day tickets, and we hit Disney Sea first on the Sunday, and I had read a lot online about this theme park. So for the theme park nuts out there, this is one of their favourites. When you're talking about genuine theming of a theme park, people were going absolutely wild online about the way that this park was designed. And our first impressions of the park, I think it's fair to say, were pretty negative. Not to do with the theming or the design of the park, but just the sheer number of people. We got up at 7:37 in the morning, or 6:45, I want to say, actually, to get there for 7:30. We actually ended up getting there for about 7:45 or 8 a.m. thing. But the park, I should say, the park opens at 8. So we thought we'll get there a bit before 8. We'll be one of the first there. We'll get in, get on all the rides, easy peasy. I do pride myself as a bit of a theme park strategist when it comes to getting on rides, and I must say I was completely thwomped by the first 4 or 5 hours of this park. First of all, everyone was queuing well before 8. There were at least, I would estimate, a couple thousand, 3,000-4,000 potentially people queuing from what must have been between 7 and 7:30 in order to be there for the gates opening at 8. So we were standing in a big long queue just to get into the park initially. Secondly, the sheer number of people once we're in the park, because I believe there's 2 hotels, one linked to Disneyland, one linked to Disney Sea. I believe the Disney Sea hotel goers were getting early access to that park, so they were already in the park. So it was just incredibly busy once we were already there. And I thought, you know what? Doesn't matter. No matter how busy it is, the first ride you get on, as long as you're there for opening, which is what we were, is normally like a sub half hour, sub 20-minute wait. So we went straight to the one ride that I really wanted to go on, that I'd heard a lot about online, and that is unique to Disney Sea and unique to Disneyland Tokyo, and that is Journey to the Center of the Earth. And why don't you explain briefly what happened with our time queuing for Journey to the Center of the Earth, Caroline?
Well, first of all, we were pretty shocked when we got there, because it already said the queue time was 40 minutes or 50 minutes even, maybe, I don't remember. But so we got in the queue figuring that this was the ride that we wanted to make sure we would do, and so better off starting the day with that. And we queued our 40 minutes, we were very patient, and then we finally got to the sort of loading area of the ride, and it broke down. And I mean, we have no idea what happened. They didn't explain that in English. But we were given these priority tickets that we could use later in the day, which was sort of one plus side, but I was pretty pissed that we'd just wasted the first hour, essentially. I think by the time we were out of the queuing area of that ride, it was already like after 9. I don't know.
Yeah, it was after 9. That was easily the first hour of the park spent in a queue. It's a very nice queue. I must admit the theming for that ride all around is pretty impressive, but you know, good theming for a queue is no fun unless you actually get on the ride. So then we thought, right, we've been on that ride. Why don't we go on another thrill ride? Let's go for Indiana Jones. It's just north of Journey to the Center of the Earth, and it was also broken.
We thought we'd be smart, so we got the fast pass for it. Came back at 11:30. In the meantime, we'd just sort of enjoyed the theming of the park, and then we got back ready to finally go on a ride at 11:30, and it had broken.
So that is like two of the top maybe 4 or 5 thrill rides in the entire park, and that's the thing about Disney Sea. And this is a criticism I have of all the non-Magic Kingdom parks, if that makes sense. So any Disney park which doesn't have the Cinderella Castle or Sleeping Beauty Castle, in my view, because they have fewer smaller rides, more emphasis is put on people queuing in the larger rides, and that puts a lot more strain on them, and often they'll break more often, and it just creates a really crappy day, to be honest, when the rides break on in the parks that aren't Magic Kingdom, that has just in what seems like an infinite supply of rides. So that was a really frustrating start to the day. I'm trying to remember, Caroline, what was the first high of the day?
I'm trying to think. Well, then we just sort of gave up and decided to go on a ride we knew we could get on. So we went on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and you'd read, Bally, that it was pretty crap online, but we actually enjoyed it, so that was probably the first high.
Yeah, I'd read it wasn't incredible online, and I'd been on the one in France, which is utterly terrible, and it was actually really good. It was like your typical Disneyland storybook ride, done obviously 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Like, it was just pretty well done. Like you said, Caroline, we only queued about maybe 15-20 minutes, which was decent. And we thought, that was a really good ride. And it's in the same area of the park as Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is all based on novels by Jules Verne. It's in this area called like the Hidden Island, and it's right beside the central volcano of the park. And it is a really, really well done, impressive area. Like the way that Journey to the Center of the Earth links around the park, that area of the park, I should say, and it just thematically really hits you like, wow, this properly feels like Jules Verne. And I know that other parks like Disneyland Paris has a real emphasis on Jules Verne, but I definitely thought this park and this area did it better. So after Journey to the Center of the Earth, I was absolutely dying all day to experience the Disneyland Tokyo Tower of Terror, because I've heard that it is completely different to both the Tower of Terrors, well, all 3 of the other Tower of Terrors I've been on in Paris, Los Angeles, and Orlando. And I have to say, we did it much later in the day. I think we got a fast pass for it at that stage.
Yeah.
We weren't able to get on Toy Story all day. There were no fast passes available for it right from the start of the day, and on top of that, our sort of, maybe you could say, fast passes plus one. The fast passes we got when Journey to the Center of the Earth broke doesn't allow you to go on Toy Story. It allows you to go on any other ride that accepts fast passes. So that was frustrating. I have done Toy Story Midway Mania before in Orlando and California, actually, and it is a great ride, and it wasn't really for me to experience this ride. It's just because I knew Caroline would really like it, but we'll have to save that one for another Disney trip. So we'd only been on one ride by this point, and we had our fast pass for Tower of Terror, we had our fast pass for Indiana Jones. We then went to Indiana Jones. It broke. They said, come back any time in the day, it'll work, your fast pass will work. So then after that, where did we get? I think we had lunch, we had a drink, we had a beer. I think then eventually time came around where we did go on Indiana Jones, and it was really good. I've been on Indiana Jones in California. I believe it's the same ride, more or less. Caroline, what did you think of it?
Oh, I really liked it. The theming was brilliant in the queuing area, so that was really fun. It really set the scene. And I don't know, I remember a couple of moments where it had quite fun bits that made you jump a bit on the roller coaster, and yeah, I really liked it. It just felt like you're on an adventure.
I must say, it's not a roller coaster, Carla. It's a fixed automated. You're in a Jeep, and it's on a fixed track. But it's really impressive. It's It's a good ride. Caroline's very angry at my correction. So after that, I think we did go on Journey to the Center of the Earth. It did finally get fixed. Before I talk about that, I should say that I found out about it being fixed using an app on my phone, which I downloaded. I read online using like my data that there's like an app for Disneyland Tokyo, but it's all in Japanese. So this was like some fan or some forum or someone somewhere had basically made this app for English speakers, which was good. So it was an unofficial app, but it was really up to date. It was really helpful for checking out ride wait times. And that was another thing that just, I knew Disneyland Tokyo would obviously be Japanese, but it really is just Japanese. And I've always been impressed when you go into any Disneyland or Disney World park. The second you get through the gate, you see the maps, and in the maps there's about 8, 9, 10 different languages, including Japanese, your English, French, German, Spanish, whatever, you name it. They have maps in all these languages in Disney parks that I've been to across the world. And then you get to Japan and they only have Japanese maps, and it's a bit frustrating, but it's easily fixed. There's plenty of PDFs of English maps online, so I downloaded one and just accessed it through my phone. But that was a bit frustrating. So anyway, we found out through the app that Journey to the Center of the Earth was working again, so we went on that. Caroline, what do you think of this ride?
I actually wasn't that much of a fan, but I think the trouble was that I'd had such a build up to this ride. I think if we'd got on it the first time, I might have been a bit more impressed by it. But my criticism really was that they'd done all this brilliant theming for most of the ride, but there was only one sort of thrill element at the end, and then it was over. Like, I was pretty unimpressed with that.
Yeah, it's pretty desperately short at ride time of, I believe, about 2 minutes, which is pretty painful. Especially, it's the same ride system as rides like Test Track at Epcot in Orlando, and Test Track is definitely about like a 3, 4, 5 minute long ride, and there's more elements. It just is a better ride in my view. I'm really glad I went on it, and it is a really cool ride, but it's just a bit short. And like I said, I love the way it loops around the hidden island, but yeah, they just needed to give it a bit more.
Yeah, and I think it was supposed to be like their biggest thrill ride. I think that's why I felt so let down by it, because the thrill element was kind of lacking a bit, I felt like. Yeah. I honestly thought Indiana Jones had more of a thrill element to it.
Right, I agree. And the reason that more of a fuss is made about Journey to the Center of the Earth is because it's an exclusive to Disneyland Tokyo, whereas Indiana Jones isn't. That's like their big thing. And obviously it's part of the centerpiece of the park with the volcano and everything. So they do make a big deal about it. But yeah, it's slightly short, but still it was a great ride. It's a very quirky. I don't know a whole lot about Jules Verne, but there's some really quirky stuff it does. So yeah, I'd still highly recommend checking it out. Rest of the day, what did we do? We eventually did get on Tower of Terror, and I must say that, you know, the whole Twilight Zone theming is completely ripped out. It's basically that some sort of collector he's like a sort of colonial international collector who travels the world collecting things from around the world. He owns this hotel that he's essentially turned into a museum, or at least it's some sort of storage. It's not really clear because the ride's all in Japanese. There is a story, but we kind of can't keep up with it. I've not looked it up in English online yet. I should try and do that, but essentially there's a statue that from somewhere we don't really know.
Well, presumably Africa. It looks like an African style mask.
Well, it could be Aztec, it could be Southeast Asia, we don't know.
I suppose, but I feel, well, okay, fine.
But it could be from anywhere, and it's pretty. It's good. Like there's some really interesting stuff going on, like in the build up and the way that like the statue itself vanishes, and I don't know if I prefer it or not to the Twilight Zone themed ones, but it's just a really unique take on that ride. And Caroline, the day before, you were just saying, we were talking through some rides, and you were just saying, I'm just not going on Tower of Terror. I cannot do drop rides. And I was saying, yeah, I mean, it's a drop ride, so I don't know if I can persuade you. But then on the day, you were pretty keen.
Yeah, I don't know, from the outside, the hotel that they'd constructed just looked so impressive. And there was just a part of me that didn't want to miss out. And actually, because you told me that the Journey to the Centre of the Earth ride was like the biggest thrill ride, and then I found it distinctly non-thrilling, I thought I could probably handle the Tower of Terror, so I gave it a go, and I ended up absolutely loving it.
Yeah, no, it's a great ride all around. And you see, that's the thing about Disney Sea, is after we've named those few rides, there's not a whole lot more going on. There is sort of like an undersea area based off of Little Mermaid that we did go to. And we went and saw like the Little Mermaid show, which was incredibly Japanese and incredibly cheesy, and there were a bazillion children everywhere. But I thought it was decent. Caroline, you were less impressed.
Well, I just can't. I mean, it's
You just wanted an English-speaking Ariel.
She didn't have to speak English. I just needed her to sing the songs in English. It just, of course, if the park in Japan is full of Japanese, that's absolutely fine. I don't need English around, but I just can't handle Disney songs not being sung as the original songs. Like, for me, that ruins it.
Yeah, this was a theme throughout some of the rides where there's a lot more spoken word.
Pretty much all of the rides.
Well,
to be honest.
yeah,
all of them, in fact.
No, there's not.
There was only smidgens of English in a few songs.
No, I'm talking about like the majority. There's plenty of rides out there that you don't need any language to go on and have a good time. There are plenty of rides where it's hugely important. But yeah, other than that, like the theming of that whole underwater area, though, the Ariel, like there's loads of smaller kiddie rides. It's like a food court, some shops and things. Like it's really well done, and it's all under aircon. We still got sunburned on the day at Disney Sea. And by that point of the day, we were pretty tired, but we decided we were going to stick it out and stick around for their nighttime show. So this was a 13-hour day, I think we did in the end. So we stayed around for Fantasmic, which I have seen in both Florida and California. And it was good. I don't think you were a big fan, Caroline. I definitely think the Florida one's a bit more spectacular, or maybe I was just a bit more impressionable first time round. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just an overly critical person when it comes to shows. Maybe I am, but there was like barely a storyline. I'm probably being overly critical because this is essentially aimed at children.
But you saw all the heroes and you saw all the villains, and like it was great.
No, it wasn't for me. I got bored.
It maybe helps that like I'm coming from being an absolute Disney fanboy in the first place.
No, but I mean, I love the films. I haven't spent the time in Disneyland that you have, but I've always loved the films. I know the songs, you know.
So that was the end of a pretty tiring day at Disney Sea. And then what do you do at the end of a tiring day of Disney Sea? You come back for more the next day with Disneyland. And I thought this park was not better. Overall, I think Disney Sea was just a spectacular park. Like the theming, the rides, other than it breaking down and other than the time of year, and it was incredibly busy. It was a Sunday during summer. Like that's our own fault for coming at that time. The park was just incredibly well put together. Like the theming of places like the American area, where it had like the Tower of Terror, it had a huge cruise ship, it had a really cute little Cape Cod, Boston, Massachusetts themed area that had its own shrimp buns, which were incredible, and they were unique to Disneyland Sea, as we found out online as we were looking for them in the other Disneyland park, which was very frustrating. I think the sort of Lost World with Indiana Jones works well as well. Look, there's a really impressive like sort of side part which looks a lot like Venice, and they really go for it with the gondolas, and it's sort of off to the side, and the entrance is all based on Europe, and that area is done really well as well, and it links to the hotel. So I'm sure, although we didn't see inside the hotel, it's all themed under that sort of Italian Venetian ideal, which was pretty cool. But yeah, Disneyland Park. More rides. It's got your standard. It's got your Splash Mountain, your Space Mountain, your Thunder Mountain, your Small World, Buzz Lightyear. You name it. It's got its Fantasyland, Toontown. I was shocked at how identical it was to Magic Kingdom in Orlando, bar a few things. I think some things were a lot smoother. I thought that Space Mountain was better than Orlando. Like, that was a pretty great ride. Splash Mountain and Thunder Mountain were the same as far as I could tell, and it really reminded me just all the three mountains, even though they're not like incredible thrill rides in terms of like how scary or impressive they are. They're really long rides that, like, you queue a long time for these rides and then you get on them and you have a really good time. Like, what did you think of some of the main thrill rides or the mountains?
Yeah, I loved them. I think Splash Mountain was my favourite.
Didn't get very wet.
No, but I didn't mind. Even though it was really hot, I didn't really fancy getting soaked because we did that first. But I don't know, I thought they were great. And we did a good job with the fast passes of actually... I mean, we had to queue for Splash Mountain, but the others we all fast passed, so it felt so much smoother than the day before. And all of the three mountain rides I thought had a really good thrill element. Space Mountain was my least favourite just because, I mean, I really loved it. I loved the whole we were in the dark being thrown around thing, but I felt really motion sick at the end of it. So that was a downer, but the other two were brilliant.
I just felt like I was back more in my element with this park. Like, I was really defeated by the start of Disney Sea, both by the crowds and the rides breaking down. Like, I do definitely pride myself on being able to get fast passes efficiently and getting from ride to ride. And I feel like with these parks, with Disneyland the second day, we really made an effort to get fast passes on the minute that you were able to get a new one, and we were able to fast pass 4 or 5 rides, and literally, like you said, only queued for Splash Mountain, pretty much.
Well, and also I think because it was our second day, we'd learned a little from the errors of our first day, and one stereotype that I think I can safely say is that the Japanese bloody love a good queue. It was insane. There were various shows at Disney Sea. You could see at different points they were going to be on,
like,
and
separate to Fantasmic, like little smaller shows during the day.
Yeah, with just stages set up that were empty, and like a sign next to it saying showings at 12:30 and 4 and whatnot. And no joke, we saw people sat down queuing. The worst we saw was 4 hours before the show was going to be. And they sit there and...
They got their umbrellas, parasols.
The sun. They're like covered in clothes so they don't burn. They've sat on like cushion things on the floor and they've got their food. And a lot of people just went to sleep, which I guess is what I'd want to do too. But it just blew my mind that was, they've clearly come to Disney Sea and thought, all right, today I want to see the show with, what's his face, Duffy and Stacey Lou, these big characters that we've never heard of before. It was insane. Yeah,
it's really interesting just seeing how different cultures treat Disney parks, and yeah, the queuing for these rides was unbelievable.
We just couldn't compete.
Yeah, it was.
We weren't willing to compete.
We weren't willing to, and I was getting really anxious about Fantasmic Disney Sea, thinking, we're gonna be 2 hours before, and we ended up being about 45 minutes early, and we got a great seat, and it was actually really good. But I was shocked at how few people were actually queuing for the main show at the end of the night.
They were probably too tired.
Yeah, but back to Disneyland Park. Just some little things I noticed that are very different to other sort of Magic Kingdom, Cinderella Castle parks. You can actually properly go in the castle with this one, and it's like an actual attraction's maybe a strong word.
Like an exhibition.
It's like an exhibition. It's like a walkthrough thing. You're walking through the Cinderella story, but there's like stained glass windows, and like you're actually on the first floor. And by first floor, I mean British first floor. So you got your ground floor, then your first floor. None of this confusion that the Americans and the Japanese are into, which is first floor being ground floor. But anyway, it was quite good. It was quite nice to see out from the Cinderella Castle, like over the rest of Fantasyland, and yeah, it's quite interesting. Another big difference I noticed was there's an entire most of Main Street, not the whole of Main Street, and Main Street is a lot shorter than the US one, both US ones. There's like a canopy, and it seems permanent. I want to say maybe they do remove it at the end of summer or not. I'd be surprised if they left it up in winter. But there's a green canopy. Like, it is made of metal, but yeah, it's just to give a bit of shade to the entrance, and it actually hides the castle well. So with like these parks, they like to try and hide the castle till you're actually through the main gate, and then you walk into the park and you go, oh God, there's the Cinderella Castle right in front of me. So that was interesting. What else? Right, let's talk about food and prices and merch. The number, like, all through my life, ever since my parents had taken me to Disney, since I was a tiny kid, we have like avoided merch at Disney parks, and broadly speaking, we've not avoided food, but we've just sort of bitten the bullet on food. We've just accepted the food's really expensive. We're just going to buy it anyway because it's easier than bringing food into the parks, which you're technically not meant to do. But anyway, the food and the merchandise at Disneyland Tokyo in both parks is incredibly cheap. It's ridiculous how cheap it is.
Or I guess you should say sort of reasonably priced, just cheap in comparison. I don't know.
It's very cheap for like official Disney branded goods, which you can't buy anywhere else for this price. And we picked up quite a lot of merchandise ourselves.
Yeah, we got a bit carried away by the prices.
So when I say good prices, what do I mean? Like, I would say that an official Disney t-shirt for like, I don't know, a man medium or whatever in an American park will set you back easily $30-$35 for a t-shirt, and then once you're looking at hoodies and stuff, you're talking about $40 to $50 for hoodies, jumpers, that sort of thing. Consistently here, I want to say t-shirts were 2,200 yen.
Yeah, 2,100.
2,100 yen. So that works out at about 15 to 16 quid, 17 euros, I would guesstimate. Let me try and do dollars. Dollars, that's about 17 at the moment as well. So yeah, super cheap for like official Disney merch. And we actually picked up 2 sets of t-shirts. It's hard to explain on an audio podcast, but you should definitely check out my Twitter feed to see these t-shirts. We picked up a Toy Story one. Another common thing that is huge in Japan that we saw a ton of in Disneyland is couples and friends and anyone in groups or twos or any combination of people wearing matching clothes. Like, it just goes on everywhere. Like, what did you think about the sheer number of people we saw matching clothes, and like how early on we spotted it? Like, we spotted it in the queue for Journey to the Center of the Earth, like the first thing we did on the first day.
Well, I ended up feeling a bit silly that we weren't matching, to be honest. That was the extent of it. Felt like we were the odd ones out. And it was really fun because you could spend a lot of your time in queues just admiring people's outfits. And particularly the ones where it was friends. Because if people are wearing Disney tops and they've bought the same one, it's very easy to match. But there were people that had come to the park, both male and female, of like either same-sex groups, mixed sex, or whatever, who'd gone to a lot of effort to be in near, if not completely identical outfits. Like, they might have chosen to dress as schoolgirls and schoolboys, but some were just dressed in, just absolutely identical, down to the shoes and the handbags. It was very impressive.
Yeah, it was bizarre to say the least. Yeah. It's just not what you see in the other parks, and it was really interesting. And I think, as a rule now, for when we're in any future Disney parks or theme parks, we're gonna try and match and bring a bit of Japan to the rest of the world.
Out our Toy Story t-shirts.
Exactly. And yeah, so that's merch. Food. We've already mentioned shrimp buns, which are incredible.
Steamed shrimp buns, we should say.
Steamed shrimp buns. The food is really good and really cheap. We went to like the first food place we went to was like an American themed sandwich bar. I had like a proper Reuben, which is like what Americans would call corned beef. We would call like I don't know, beef with your sauerkraut, and it was like 500-600 yen. So that's like 700-800.
Yes, however, we had it as a set, which meant like as a meal. So I think we paid more like 1,100
right. So
per person for the meal.
Per person. So you're paying like £7-8 for a meal, but this is still like down on the consistent $10 to $15 it's always is in the US, and on top of that the snacks were even cheaper because they're a bit smaller. So we had stuff like shrimp buns, as we said. We also had pizza spring rolls, which are another exclusive to Toontown in Disneyland, which we looked up online and targeted. We were that keen, and they were like, I don't know, a few hundred each, like 250. 450, yeah, a bit higher than I'm saying, but still a couple of quid, £2-3.
Yeah, and they were incredible. They got better as you ate more of it, I felt like.
Yeah, so generally just really impressed. Park tickets were broadly the same. I wouldn't say they were any more or less. They're just still very expensive. You get charged to go on the monorail here, which really, really annoyed me because obviously the monorail is included everywhere in Orlando, which is the other Disney World is the only other place with the monorail. So yeah, that was a bit of a disappointment. But again, it's cheap. It's like 200-300 yen, 400 yen to get on the monorail. So we did that once, which was cool. And it goes around the whole resort and linked to our hotel, even though it was a non-Disney hotel, even though it was part of the official resort, which is interesting. Doesn't happen often with Disney parks. But anyway, overall experience, Disney. I'm really glad to have done Disney Sea. I can see why people kick off about how amazing it is online, because thematically it is perhaps Disney's most impressive park. Perhaps. I don't think I can maybe come to that conclusion yet, but it's definitely up there. In terms of that other park, it's almost identical, almost to the Magic Kingdom in Orlando. I'll always pick the one in Orlando above it for the simple reason it has the Hall of Presidents, which I always think is hilarious, and I love it, and I'm excited to see what they do with Donald Trump, because I know that's coming in a few months. But yeah, Caroline, overall thoughts, having been to Disney now with a massive Disney nerd, and you've had a couple of days of intense toing and froing between rides, getting fast passes on the dot, getting in queues, getting to shows. What did you think?
Well, I have to admit that I was quite skeptical before we went, that I wasn't 100% sure that that's what I wanted to do with a holiday where we've come all the way to Japan. But I had a really good time. I actually really enjoyed being there with you and your vast knowledge of Disney, because you had a lot of fun facts that I enjoyed. And I was very, very impressed by Disney Sea. It felt huge to me, and the theming was just incredible. And Disneyland had that magic to it as well. I think, yeah, I would highly recommend anyone to go there. Just maybe don't go on a Sunday in the heat in August, or the Monday we were a bit unlucky because the cloud broke, so it felt even hotter. So it was a bit of a slog, but I was just magical. It was good fun.
Yeah, it's actually my first time in memory that I've been to a Disney park in midsummer. Like normally we always go in spring or autumn or Christmas time to specifically Florida, but even when we've been to California, it's been other times. Same with Paris. So midsummer Disney, big no, but it's kind of how it worked out for us. We sort of, well, I felt like we had to try it, and yeah, I loved it. It was great. Got some merch, got some stuff. So yeah, you can get that back to the UK. I think that about wraps it up for our thoughts on Disney. I should say very briefly, we're currently now in Kyoto. We will be back. We've just come from Hakone. We're now in Kyoto, but we're going to talk about Hakone in the next segment because we have a lot to say about our hiking experience. So don't go anywhere. We will talk about that very soon. Welcome back. This is another audio log with me, Bally, and my girlfriend, Caroline. So, follow last segment we talked about Disneyland and Disney Sea. We stayed there for 3 nights. Following our 3 nights, we then took the train back to central Tokyo, and from Tokyo we got the bullet train to Odawara. And then from Odawara, that train took about maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. And then from Odawara, we got a bus into the mountains, it's fair to say. Can we remember the name of this mountain range? It's the mountain range that Hakone, the town Hakone is in. Hakone is a very small town, and the bus took about half an hour to 45 minutes. Half an hour. Going straight into the mountains, essentially, and we stayed at this incredible hotel called the Fujiya Hotel, right in the heart of this mountain range, and we stayed there for 2 nights. Caroline, why don't you say some of the stuff we got up to in Hakone?
Okay, well, we were inspired to go to Hakone because we wanted to do some hiking, and in theory there are some good views of Mount Fuji from Hakone. So the first day when we arrived, actually we didn't get up to so much because we arrived sort of mid-afternoon, and just the hotel was so nice, our room was so nice, we just chilled out. It was very sort of a traditional style, but without being full-on traditional Japanese. So there were chairs and beds, not futons, but it was really nice. And then the next day we decided to go for an ambitious hike that when we asked one of the guys that worked at the hotel for just a bit of advice on it, he said it wasn't possible. And firstly, it wasn't possible without a car, and secondly, it just wasn't possible, which we knew fine well it was possible from a bit of research online. So I felt pretty smug when we actually did our hike. Proved him wrong.
So yeah, the day before we got fairly washed out. There wasn't much opportunity to do or see much. We got in quite late anyway, in any case. But then on the day of our hike, we decided we were going to do like a more grand loop, which would have taken maybe 4, 5, 6 hours total.
6 or 7 hours.
6 or 7 hours total.
We were not prepared.
We were not prepared for that. The weather on the day was cloudy, very humid, and rain showers on and off. Nothing torrential like it had been frequently since coming to Japan. We've had quite a lot of rain, to be honest. And when I say like rain showers, I'm used to a sort of a climate like Florida, where at around 2-3 p.m. in the summer, almost consistently like clockwork every day, you get a downpour. But here it can downpour like really heavily for 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes. It's pretty incredible. So yeah, we were decided to climb Mount Kentucky, and wow, it is a really impressive, picturesque route. To get up it, I believe it took us about an hour and a half.
No, only because remember it. No, actually, you're right. Probably about an hour. Yeah.
It was certainly slower going up than down.
Yeah.
It's just so you start. So from our hotel, we had to get a bus even further into the mountains, essentially, basically to the base of Mount Kentucky, and yeah, it's just there's a shrine quite near the start, and you just go up and up and up through. Like we saw, the weather wasn't amazing, but it wasn't horrendous, and we hardly saw anyone on the route. On the way up, we literally saw one runner coming back down the mountain, and other than that, we didn't see anyone until we got to the summit. And we should say that the summit is I believe it's 12. I tweeted this. It's 1,240 meters or something. I can't quite remember. But yeah, what did we do and what did we see? What did we experience when we finally got to the top, Caroline?
Well, you learned that you should listen to me because I told Bally that there was going to be some kind of restaurant at the top of the mountain, and he just absolutely did not believe me, like, at all.
It felt really sort of far from any civilization. I was going to be absolutely stunned by seeing anything, to be honest.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, because our hike itself was pretty vertical. It was very much like constant climbing upwards, but it was a very well-maintained trail, which was nice. It was nice and clear. And so we finally get to the top where, in theory, if it had been a clear day, we would have had the most beautiful views of Mount Fuji. But unfortunately for us, it was not a clear day, and we didn't have very much visibility at all. But the one lovely sight we did see up there was that there was this little refuge restaurant. And so we went in. There were some other...
Restaurant's a strong word.
Yeah, refuge hut that sold things. And we went in. There were some other climbers in there. It was obviously all Japanese. It had this sort of incense kind of smell. It was all like low and wooden and dark and just lots of random things in there. And then I went over to the counter, and this ancient woman was there. She literally had she had a kind of hunchback anyway, but could barely move, so she was shuffling around.
She was struggling to walk and breathe and like communicate even clearly with the other Japanese people. She was...
Yeah.
I was
ancient.
Like, she clearly lived at the summit of Mount Kentucky and didn't really go elsewhere because she simply can't. Like the way up and down is, it's not an easy hike, but it's not a hard hike, I should say, but it's not easy either. And it was fairly tiring.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, she had to hold on to the walls to be able to walk around. So like, there is no way she was going anywhere. But the other hikers that were there before us were being served some soup when we arrived. So I managed just through gesticulating to convey the fact that we'd also like some soup. And we got some water. And she was really nice, though. She was really happy we were there. I felt so guilty that she was cooking for us because, like we just said, she could barely move. So, yeah, that felt pretty unfair. But she seemed happy.
And we should say there were two separate buildings at the summit, and in the other building there was another lady doing something who we might have assumed could have been related to this other old lady. So she wasn't up there by herself, as shocking as that would be. But yeah, so it was a very cloudy day, and the visibility was nowhere near good enough for Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji it's not close, but it's not that far away. It's fairly far away, and we just couldn't see a thing, to be honest. Like, I've got pictures on Twitter of the summit, and it's very cloudy. So certainly we're going to have to come back to Mount Kentucky and actually try and see Mount Fuji. But yeah, any more to say on the way down?
Well, I was just going to say that we were mentally prepared to not see Mount Fuji. It's a really common occurrence that it's obscured by clouds. But in this instance, our mountain was also obscured by clouds, so we couldn't see a thing. The way down was much easier. We had wanted to extend our hike to another mountain, which actually would have been fairly suicidal.
And like an extra at least 4 hours.
Yeah, and we did not have the provisions. So fortunately, nature prevented us because the trail wasn't very well maintained at this one point. So we decided it was just safer not to risk it. So we headed back down the mountain, and that was quicker. We took a slightly different route down, which was it was nice to mix it up. We saw some nice wildlife on the walk too. We saw about 5 or 6 toads that were pretty huge, which was fun. And some really lovely sort of finch type birds were having a good old sing-song when we were up there.
So loud, and they're so small as well.
Yeah, it was really cool. It's something I've noticed here actually, because you don't hear all that much bird song in the UK or in Belgium necessarily. I don't know, I just feel like the countryside is a lot louder here. Although that's also because they have cicadas. That's how you say it? Cicadas, yeah. And at points they can be deafening. They are that loud. It's nuts.
Certainly the bug life here is pretty epic. Like the size of... There's like moths and butterflies that are just... And dragonflies and everything in between, cockroaches. We've seen loads of bugs which are absolutely huge here. Like one of them flew into us before, and I could have sworn it was like a hummingbird or something, but it was like some sort of...
I think that was a cicada or something like
Yeah,
that.
they're just incredibly big, and I guess it's just because like it's a very humid, wet environment here in Japan, especially in the summer. So yeah, we made it back down the mountain. Like I said, we only had 2 nights in Hakone, so it was really just get there, get a clear day of hiking. We did some hiking, ate a couple nice. One night was more successful than the other for eating. We went to a nice South Korean restaurant, and then the other night we just sort of ate in the hotel. Though I had a bit of an explore for some restaurants in the rain, but were unsuccessful. So yeah, just 2 nights in Hakone, and then sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say another reason to go to Hakone is the onsen, which are the natural hot spring baths. We kind of didn't work up enough courage or didn't have sufficient interest, probably a mixture of the both, to go and seek one out. But one of the reasons I chose the hotel we went to was that it had its own baths as well. And we were lucky enough that in our room you could get the natural spring water into your own bath. So in the end we opted for that because you're supposed to be naked in these hot spring baths and they split them by gender. So it's not that much fun for the 2 of us to have to be with a bunch of random, mostly Japanese people, and the whole worry of you're not doing it right, and it's all just a bit stressful.
There's like in the guidebook we've got there's a whole etiquette to how to use an onsen, and it's all very specific, and like you have to do this and that, and it was just fine, fair enough. I think maybe it'd be worth trying to do an onsen, if not this trip, another trip or whenever, for when we can find like an outdoor one or something, or like a one up the mountains and outdoors or something on a nice day, weather-wise or something. I don't know, but so yeah, like I said, 2 nights in Hakone, 1 day of hiking essentially, and then following our 2 nights in Hakone, it was a case of back down the mountain, back to Odawara on the bus the following day, and we got the train, the bullet train, and it took about 2 hours. And I checked this out. So we weren't directly from Tokyo. We were from Odawara to Kyoto, but Tokyo to Kyoto via plane, approximately with the waiting times, takes about 4 hours once you're in and out of the airport. Via a bus is about 8 or 9, and via slow train is about 6, 7, or 8 hours. The bullet train, Tokyo Kyoto, takes 2.5 hours. So it is by far and away the easiest and fastest route, if not also the most expensive. But so yeah, we back down the mountain, got the bullet train from Odawara to Kyoto. And we are now in Kyoto, and we're here for 6 nights. We've already done some things that we will mention again in another log. But yeah, that was Hakone. Any final thoughts on Hakone?
Just that it's really worth spending a bit of time in the Japanese mountains. It felt very different to Europe, which is more, at least my experience. And I don't know, it was just beautiful. It just felt like a really nice thing to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was incredible and it was such a nice juxtaposition to the 3 nights we'd had at Disney before. It was just completely different, but also still typically Japanese, which was great. So yeah, we've got loads more thoughts on Kyoto coming your way in the next segment. So yeah, that's goodbye for now. We'll see you shortly. Hello and welcome back to the final segment of Bally's audio log in Japan with Caroline. We are now currently in Tokyo, back traveling today from Kyoto to Tokyo, and then tomorrow we'll be making the long journey back from Tokyo all the way back to Brussels via Abu Dhabi. So, we've got some thoughts on Kyoto because we've not talked about it at all. And last time we spoke to you was Hakone. So,
no, it wasn't.
Huh?
We did the video. Oh, sorry. You mean?
Well, we did a video, but Caroline, these people are listening to the audio log. They might not follow me on Twitter. Know that I did videos on the account at Ballyman91 on Twitter. A few videos online. Lots of days this holiday, let's just say. So yeah, last audio log was Hakone. This one is Kyoto. So why don't we start with, I think it was our first full day in Kyoto, perhaps, which was last Friday. We went on a long 10-mile run, and included in this run was Nintendo headquarters and one of their development buildings, the two buildings near each other, I should say, and I'd seen this online, and I'd always thought, I really want to go there if I ever go to Kyoto. Like, that would be a really cool thing to just see and do. And, well, I say do, there's not much you can do there, because obviously you're not allowed in, and there's not like a museum or anything nearby. It's all just a headquarters, really, that you're not allowed in, with a big Nintendo logo on the side of the building. It was pretty cool to be there. The lawn is pretty immaculate on the development building, and I'm very thankful to Caroline, who I dragged all the way there. We ran all the way down from our hotel, which is up in Gion, which is an area of Kyoto, ran down south, down the river, and yeah, just off to the side in a fairly industrial area are these two Nintendo buildings, and obviously Kyoto, the home of where Nintendo was originally from, with its Hanafuda cards back in the late 19th century, which I'll get back to later. And it was just really cool to see, this is the headquarters. This is where I'm sure many of the biggest decisions are made, because we certainly know that it's not up to NOA and certainly not anyone in Europe. So, yeah, it was just quite exciting to see how Nintendo in Japan operates. No, we didn't see how it operates, but it was cool to be there nonetheless. And do you have any thoughts on seeing this great big building, Caroline, with the logo of Nintendo on it?
Well, I'm afraid that the experience for me was quite different to yours because
you were dying of heat.
Yeah, the heat and humidity in Kyoto while trying to be on a run. I was absolutely dying. If any of you have seen the video, you will be able to see that. And we were only 4K into the run at that point, so I would like to say we're both marathon runners, so normally 4K doesn't floor me like that, just as a little aside. But I would say I thought that the buildings were pretty cool. They, compared to a lot of the Japanese architecture, which is quite sort of concrete and, I don't know, nowhere near as ugly as the concrete you get in the UK, but it's still the buildings aren't always that inspiring, but Nintendo, it was sleek, it looked really nice, the logo looked great, and I would say actually the development center, which we found after the headquarters, that was more attractive than the headquarters.
Yeah, it was cool, and we saw some guy in big baggy jeans driving in his car,
black t-shirt, no suit, and white shirt for him.
Yeah, he did not look like a businessman, let's just say.
And he was driving a Mini, not a Japanese car, so I think he was rich and important.
Who knows? Maybe he's working on the next Metroid. We just don't know. But yeah, he was up to something, so that was interesting. But following Nintendo, and this is really cool. We went to the Fushimi Inari Taisha Shrine. I had to read that, of course. And this is, many of you who know Nintendo will recognize this from Miyamoto's E3 video in 2015, where he sort of is talking about Star Fox Zero, and he says, I've lived in Kyoto all my life, and I know the city well, and I used to come to this shrine all the time, and the shrine is basically a Shinto shrine, and the main sort of spirit animal of the shrine, you might say, is a fox. And Miyamoto says, and I was inspired by this shrine and many other symbols growing up of the fox, and I came up with that for Star Fox, and it was. I rewatched the video after going to the shrine, and I can't say that the shrine had a whole lot to do with Star Fox, but other than the fact that it's a fox, and that yes, he claimed in the video that flying through the gates was like flying through these gates, and it's obviously famous for the red gates. So when I saw this video, and I'd seen this shrine in other sort of touristy videos, and it's very famous. Like when you think of Japan, a lot of people do think of this shrine.
Well, sorry, I was just going to say it's incredibly beautiful and impressive, and there are thousands upon thousands of these red gates. And they're all these like scarlet, crimson, red. And what was really cool was when you were walking up the mountain, they didn't have any writing on them, but when you're walking back down, so on the opposite side, they had all these characters on them, which I'm sure said all sorts of different things that we have no idea about.
Yeah, when I saw the Miyamoto video, I just thought there was maybe like 100 of them maximum. Basically, a big row of them, and everyone would go in the big row, and it was like, oh, that's cool, wow. And when I first got there, you can see that sort of the row that Miyamoto was standing in front of, and I was like, oh, this is cool. But then you realise that there's far more than 100. There are thousands upon thousands of these gates, and like Caroline said, they go on a big trail around this mountain.
Up it, really.
Up it, yeah, and I'd say there's over about 1.5 miles of path essentially covered in these gates, which is just incredible. So after Nintendo, we ran to the shrine, and we ran around it, and
and walked.
Yeah, we're not
that good.
Yeah, we're not robotic, and
it's also got little there are these shrine points along the way as well, so it's not like it's only the gateposts, although I'd say they are the most sort of amazing part of it, but there are all these small shrines as you're going around, and there's a direction they want you to go in and stuff. It's a really impressive experience. We'd like highly recommend it.
Yeah, and what's beautiful about it is that it is so close to Nintendo, and actually
what's beautiful about it?
From the mountain itself, you can overlook Nintendo headquarters. And when I say beauty, I mean it's impressive that people like Shigeru Miyamoto lived sort of in that area, and they were so close to the shrine. Because when I saw that video from E3, I thought, oh, they've driven Miyamoto halfway up the country, big deal, we get it, he's from Japan, what's the big deal? But actually this is a very local Kyoto thing, and it is within 10-15 minute walk of the Nintendo headquarters, which I just didn't expect, which was interesting. And after that, we actually got some octopus balls on which are called, I can never remember their name.
Teru something Miyaki, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll give up on the name, but they're based in Osaka, and you see them everywhere, and they're quite cheap. But we pay like 500 yen. That's like £3 for 7, and yeah, they're great. Me and MBZ actually had some a good couple of years ago at Hyper Japan in London 2 summers ago.
Takoyaki. I just looked it up.
Takoyaki. Caroline has found the name.
Originated in Osaka.
And they originated in Osaka, which I guess can lead us on to our next point that we'd like to talk about. And this was a day trip we actually took a few days later. Yeah, because we did like a long run on one day, and then it was our rest day. Yeah, we sacrificed a day to do a long run for our marathon training. But then the following day after that, we did a day trip. So Kyoto was sort of in southwest Japan, but there are more southern points as well as more western points. So we went south from Kyoto to Nara, which is so Kyoto sort of prides itself as the traditional capital of Japan. But if you're actually being technical about it, and sort of you want an even more traditional capital of Japan, Nara is the even older traditional capital of Japan, going back to 700 AD, which was sort of at that point in time in Japan there was a huge Buddhist influence, is that's the sort of Japanese history I picked up. Do you want to add anything on that?
Just that was something we've discovered while being here, because quite often you have the image of Japan as quite a isolationist kind of country. Not anymore, of course, but traditionally. But actually, for example, at the point when Nara was the capital, they were very open to Buddhism, like Bally just said, and so to Chinese influence, and I believe East Asian influence in general. So, for example, Nara and Kyoto both have grid structures, which was how the Chinese used to have their major cities as well. So we were just interested to find there was more influence at that point when you think about it so long ago.
Yeah, and not to like merge cultures together, but a lot of it does feel quite similar when you're seeing these Buddhist shrines, and you can compare them to a lot of parts of Southeast Asia, East Asia, especially China. Not that I've been to these places, I just sort of have a rough idea of what they might look like. But yeah, we went to Nara. Really cool. We saw an absolutely huge Buddha. You think you've seen bigger Buddha when you're in China?
I have, yeah. But not to take away from this one, because every time you see a big Buddha, it's very impressive.
And he was in like this absolutely huge pagoda.
Well, I'm not sure it's pagoda, because the pagodas are the ones with all the roofs.
You have to have multiple roofs. So
yeah, it's just a shrine.
We say shrine. There will be a name of that building, but it'll be a Japanese name, and they're very hard to remember. And it was an unbelievably hot day out. The cool thing about Nara is that they've traditionally had thousands and thousands of deer there that are wild deer that are quite tame in comparison to potentially wild deer. Yeah, wild deer you'd see in the UK or Europe, and that you can like buy food for them and they come up to you and they're very gentle and sort of
There were plenty of signs warning that they might, what was it? It was like headbutt, kick, knock over or bite.
Yeah, but people are just stupid, and we just saw so many people winding up the deer. Sometimes not on purpose, but they'd have a stack of food in their hand. They'd feed one of the deer, and then a group of deer would come up to them, knowing that person had food, and then the person would freak out because all these deer came up to them wanting food.
And then they'd run away, so the deer would chase.
The horror that like hungry deer might want some food from this person, and then he or she would just throw they would run with the food away from the deer, and then the deer would just chase them. And it's just like, we're not living in a cartoon here. Can you just think before you kind of do something?
It was funny.
Yeah, it's funny, but.
And a fun fact about the deer is that they're considered national treasure because they've traditionally always lived in this huge park, the Nara Koen, where a lot of the temples are. And so the deer are protected. We saw one that looked a bit unwell, but in general they looked pretty healthy, and we saw like baby ones and older ones, and so they're protected, and it was just really fun because you could like interact with them, and they were pretty chill.
And like I said, it was an incredibly hot day, and we were really like fighting to stay in the shade. We saw a few other shrines in and around. It's all in this one park essentially, like Nara. The actual center of the city's fairly standard. I don't want to say industrial, but just built up. But every time I say there's like built up areas, they always have incredible just food everywhere. Yeah. So I'm sure it would have been good for that. Not that we stopped there, because Caroline had the idea while we were in Nara. She was like, "Why don't we check out Osaka? It's just near Nara, and it is actually closer to Nara than Kyoto. So we got a train east to west from Nara to Osaka and went out for dinner." So our guidebook told us that Osaka is actually where sushi go round, or it goes by a few other names, was actually invented along with the octopus balls, which is a name I've already forgotten. And so like Osaka, there's a couple of food things that invented in Osaka. So we were like, you know what? We've not done sushi go round yet. We've been to a good few sushi places, but we need to try out a sushi go round. So we found, I tweeted the name, I can't quite remember. It's in this area called Dotonbori. If I just quickly check my Twitter. Do you want to mention anything about Osaka quickly, Caroline?
Well, yeah, I would highly, well, probably I don't need to say this, but I hadn't been to a sushi go round before, and as someone who's had limited experience of sushi, it was really great for me because you obviously see the food coming. This place we went that Bally will tell us in just a second, it also had the names in English. They have this little plastic card that comes around just before the dish, so obviously some of them it's obvious, but some it's not. And with the way it just sort of goes around, you have time to think about it. I felt like it took all the pressure off, because the other sushi restaurants we went to, you get these pieces of paper and you're supposed to write down how many pieces of each type you want, with various degrees of English being on that paper. And that's hard, particularly for someone like me who hasn't had much sushi. So I personally really appreciated the sushi go round.
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. The name of the chain, it's a chain, and we don't know whether it's Osaka based or is more Japan wide, but the chain is called Dakai Suzan, and it was the one at Dotonbori, which is a super built up area of Osaka. We actually got the train into a sort of southwestern station in Osaka, and we thought, oh, this is near enough, we'll walk. And it was a half-hour walk from our station to Dotonbori, and we walked into what is probably, arguably, the most, or certainly in top few, most built-up areas of Japan that we've been to in our whole holiday. And, God, it was just so intense. But I sort of thought, like, how on earth are we going to find this sushi go-around place? And it was a bit tricky to spot, but we did find it. It was really great. This one was like, they had a real range in the prices of them. So some of the more fancy ones, there was some really unusual sushi. And just like a side point on sushi, while we're talking about it, is I'm so shocked at the amount of sushi here. They focus on nigiri. So for those who don't know, nigiri is basically one slab of fish on top of rice. It's not in a roll or anything. You actually make it like in the palm of your hand. And I would say about 75% of all sushi in Japanese restaurants, roughly, is actually nigiri. Like, there's very few maki rolls, and I've hardly seen any sashimi. It's all about the nigiri, and the sushi go around is no different. There's just absolutely loads of it. So from the sushi go around, we walked back to through a bit of Dotonbori, which was just crazy intense at the end of a really long hot day. We were absolutely exhausted, and the great thing is that you might be thinking, oh my god, how on earth did you get all the way from Osaka to Kyoto on the way home? And the answer is, we got a train to the right station, but then from Shin Osaka, the answer is you get the bullet train, the Shinkansen. This was our third bullet train trip of of our stay in Japan, and Osaka to Kyoto took less than 15 minutes, which was really nice, because otherwise it would have been definitely a good hour and a half, potentially, on the train.
Well, I was just going to say, Kyoto to Nara took, I think, 40 minutes on the train, and then Nara to Osaka took something like 40 again. So it's just incredible how quick that was.
So to complete the triangle with a 15-minute journey at the end of the day,
when you're exhausted,
was perfect. And like I think we mentioned before when we were talking about travel, the JR pass, so the pass that you get when you're a visitor to Japan, covers any Shinkansen.
No, it's not quite any, but it's. I didn't bother learning which ones it doesn't cover.
All right. I think it was because there are 6 Shinkansen companies, and I think the 2 companies that cover the sort of southern and southwest part of Japan. So we're talking Kyoto, Tokyo, Osaka, Yokohama. They're all within the 2 companies.
Right. But it's something like it's one type of train, I think, as opposed to a company.
Okay.
But it's not been a problem for us because it's so easy to reserve your seats in these JR travel centres that we've always just said to them, we want to travel to Tokyo on Wednesday like we did today, and they will reserve it for us.
And I don't even think any of the trains we've been on have been like absolutely packed. I think some of them have been fairly busy, but they've not been, absolutely packed. So even if you're unable to reserve seats, I'd be confident most times of day you could probably get something, especially if you're a small group.
And also with the JR Pass, you don't have to reserve. So I guess if you decided last second to do something, you could just jump on a train and it'd be absolutely fine.
Yeah, it was super easy. And yeah, we're not going on any more bullet trains anymore. It's a slow train tomorrow to get to the station, but it's definitely been a highlight of the trip for me.
Yeah, well, I have to say the bullet trains themselves make me feel quite unwell. So I've been able to admire them for the engineering, but I haven't exactly loved them. But I have loved having this JR pass, because it's just this feeling of freedom. You don't have to think, about how much will it cost if we do this and we do that. You just show the pass and away you go. I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, like it was a really ambitious sort of round trip, day trip we did to Nara, Osaka, and then back to Kyoto. But it was actually really easy to do, and people are really helpful, like when you're stuck in these things. And like one lady just walked up to us while we were on the train and said, "Oh, you have to get off now if you're going to Nara." It's like, of course she knows we're going to Nara. We look like tourists. She knows where we're going. And like, she wasn't working for the train company or anything. It's just a random lady who just told us, like, "Oh, you need to get off now." It's like, thank you. So like, people are very helpful, as we've mentioned before. But yeah, at the end of the day, we got to Kyoto, and it was going to potentially be an awkward bus home or a metro and another awkward walk. So we just thought, let's just walk it, because I really need to see this one last Nintendo attraction, which of course there's a building. It's just 15-minute walk northeast of the main Kyoto station, and you really do have to look this up on a map, because it is a really unusual walk through an incredibly residential area. There's really not much going on the streets, and I think Caroline was a bit confused where I was dragging her. And what I'm obviously talking about is the original building where Nintendo started up as a Hanafuda card company back at the end of the 19th century. So this building, apparently the original building burned down, but they replaced it with a building next to it, which apparently is still an official Nintendo building, and it's got 2 signs outside of it. I did tweet these. If you want to see the pictures I took, but essentially it says like playing cards, the Nintendo playing card company, and then it says like Kyoto, Japan, and so like it's just like, it was nice to see where the company started, and in this really quiet part of Kyoto that you just would not expect a big company like Nintendo to still own a building, but it was an interesting thing to see, and like the headquarters, there's not much you can do there. And a lot of people I've read online want this building to be turned into some museum, but I mean, when has what the fans wanted ever affected Nintendo's output? So there you go. But it was nice to see anyway, and yeah, I'd highly recommend checking it out if you're a Nintendo fan in Kyoto. Other Kyoto stuff we'd like to mention. Another thing we did, which was super unusual, was an owl cafe. So I had no idea what to expect. Caroline, what were your thoughts going into this experience, and what were they coming out?
Well, the Owl Cafe itself was different to how I expected it to be, because I haven't been to any kind of animal cafe before, but I've particularly heard about cat cafes, and while I didn't think that owls would be roaming around, I did think it would be more like a cafe, maybe, like more. They did have seats, but it's just they clearly use the name cafe because that brings people like us in. And I'd booked online using Veltra, which I hadn't used before. I just googled like Owl Cafe Kyoto, and that allowed me to make the reservation online, because I was a bit worried, because I read that these places always need reservations. And then we go in, and I can't quite remember how much it cost, but it was something like, I don't know, 15 quid each or something like that, which I think is...
For an hour.
Yeah, for a whole hour.
And a free drink.
So we get there. We actually initially go to the wrong Owl Cafe, which was my fault. And the people in Japan are so incredibly nice that the lady that worked at the competing owl cafe took us to the correct one, which is just, cannot imagine someone in, oh my god, Belgium.
It was like a solid 6, 7, 8 minute walk. It wasn't even like next to her cafe, and we were just walked all the way to the front door of the other place, basically.
Yeah, and I felt so bad, and it's not even like you can't tip or, you know, like there.
Yeah, apparently tipping culture here is just not a thing at all. Like, apparently it's rude to even tip, and like
I've read that you risk having the waiter sort of chase you down if you tip. I don't know, I mean, we haven't tried, but we've read that one should.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of Western tourists try to tip, and there's probably something there'll be a polite way that they respond that we've not come to yet, but who knows.
Plus, I mean, service charge has sometimes been included in places we've been, so I assume that's how they do it. Or, you know, maybe they actually pay their waiting staff a reasonable wage, which is a crazy idea. But, yeah, we went into this owl cafe. First of all, I was surprised because there was no one in there, apart from the people that worked there. So there was this nice lady. I showed her the voucher to show I'd reserved. And we got these little lanyards to wear with the time that we're allowed to be in there on, which was hilarious because as if she couldn't remember. And we had to watch this little instructional video for how to interact with the owls, which was really useful because basically... The people that work there are the ones that directly handle the owls, so they will hand an owl to you, they'll make sure it's placed on your hand properly, and all the owls have these little sort of tethers on them that get wrapped around your hand because you need to make sure, sometimes the owls might get startled or whatever and they flap, and you need to make sure they can't fly away because there's a risk they hurt themselves, or well, then the people have to catch them. I'm sure that's not much fun for the owls, or they might hurt each other, etc. So you need to hold them properly. And so we watched that little video. We had our free apple juice each. And what was cool was they had about 10 to 12 owls, I'd say. Yeah. All different breeds, I guess you'd say. And they were all on these little perches set out quite nicely. Like, they weren't cramped or anything. They all had their own space. And the big ones were with the big ones and the little ones with the little ones. And I was actually really impressed because the lady explained to us that there were only 3 hours that we were allowed to handle in our session because the rest were officially on breaks. So I was really pleased to you know, see that they were taking the welfare of the owls into account, and it's not as though the same poor cute owl would have to spend all day with people while maybe the bigger, scarier looking one wouldn't have any look in, or, you know, so it felt like the welfare was important, which is super important to me. And then after a while, actually, this lady left us and a guy came who had I'd say probably the best English we've heard our whole time we've been here. So that was quite nice because we could kind of chat with him about the owls. Although it was also super awkward because he had to be with us the whole time because if you don't want to hold an owl anymore, you need to give the owl back to him and he'll put it back on the perch, or if you'd like a different owl or anything. So
it was just strange.
He just had to hover the whole time. And what was hilarious was he didn't know much about the owls. Like, he clearly cared about the owls. I think, I did ask him, I think he said he'd worked there about a year, or at the cafe, they'd been doing it for about a year. So, like, he knew all their names and clearly had, like, relationships with the owls that liked men. There were a couple that seemed to hate men for whatever reason. But we were asking him, like, Bally asked which ones were from Japan, you know, like as a native species, and he was just like, that one is, I think this one is from Africa. And I was just like, it's not like we were asking him to name the breeds. It was like, name the continent where these owls were from. I mean, there was a barn owl in there, so I could have said, well, that one's from the UK. I mean, I don't know, that was weird. But otherwise, he was great. I was impressed by him. He seemed to really care about the owls, so I wasn't too worried.
Yeah, it was an unusual dynamic where you're so the three of us standing here with all these owls, and he was like, just like, would you like to hold this large owl? I was like, well, I've paid this money to be in the owl cafe. I guess that's what I have to do. So I'm like, yes, please. And so I'm holding this large owl.
With a special glove.
With a special glove for the large ones because they got big talons. And I was like, right, this is me. I'm in an owl cafe. Holding an owl. Now what do I do?
And the answer is you stand there making awkward conversation with the man while holding an owl.
Yeah, so it was bizarre,
But it was brilliant bizarre.
it was brilliant bizarre. I'm glad I did it, and I'm intrigued to see what other cafes are like. I am allergic to cats, so maybe I have to avoid that. But I'd be intrigued to see.
Well, we were quite tempted, or at least I was, by there's a pug cafe.
Yeah, I want to try that.
But it was Kyoto. We didn't find as easy to get around because they don't really have as many trains, so it would have been more the buses, and perhaps that would be absolutely fine, but just our experience when we arrived getting from the train station to our hotel was that we were on a super packed bus, and it was just a bit, it wasn't stressful in terms of figuring out the station because a brilliant tourist information lady told us exactly what to do, so that was easy. It was just stressful in terms of the volume of people, and I think it put us off taking the buses, so it just felt like the pub cafe was a bit too much out of our way, unfortunately.
Yeah, so like we couldn't do everything, but super glad we did the Owl Cafe. And yeah, Kyoto generally has been great. We should say we stayed in the Gion area. I can't Gion Gion area, and that's sort of like just a little bit northeast of the main station, by the river. I can't remember the name of the river, and it's really great for like restaurants on the river. There's also a really built up area. We actually discovered a great area for food and drink just northwest of where we are, where we actually went to another sushi go round, a Kyoto one this time. What's anything else in Kyoto I want to mention? Oh, I gotta mention the Pokemon Center.
Oh, yeah.
So I knew that like. It's bizarre. Like Nintendo have their world store. They now call it Nintendo at New York, in New York, obviously, and that's apparently the only Nintendo store in like the entire world. And it's strange because in Japan, the big chain they've got going is their Pokemon centers. So I thought we've missed out on Tokyo Pokemon Center. We're in Kyoto now. I might as well look up if there is one. And I found out that it actually opened last year in 2016. So went along to the Pokemon Center, and it is everything you might expect. It is pretty chock-a-block of just Pokemon merchandise and everything from. There were like little model. I tweeted this. It was timely with the Splatoon Splatfest on Ketchup versus Mayo, but it was like Pikachu with all of these bottles of ketchup and doing different things with ketchup, and it was just weird, and you could buy models of it, and I don't know why you would, but if you want a whole house full of models of Pikachu playing with ketchup, then this is the place to go, basically. I obviously had to pick up something to remember my favourite Pokemon, which of course is Dragonite, so I picked up a Dragonite plushie, which was decent value. It was like 2,100 yen, I believe, which is, I don't know, 15, 16 quid. I mean, things like this you could imagine in the UK just being like 20 to 30 quid. So like, again, it was pretty good value. There wasn't really any boxes of any video games. It was all like download codes, and like that's a trend I've been seeing a lot in Japan. It's all about download codes for games, and you just don't see hard copies, which is interesting. But overall, yeah, it was in a weird place. It was in a department store, and we had the right devil's own job getting there, because I'd found it on my map, and I said, right, here's a shopping center, it's in this shopping center, and Caroline was like, but this is a department store, and I was like, yeah, it is a department store, but it says it's here, so like, where is it? And like, we walked around the department store for quite a while. Eventually, we actually found an English map in the department store, and then it clearly said on like the 4th or 5th floor or something that there was the Pokemon Center.
With the kids' toys.
Wait. We're not trying to debate this, Caroline. Of course it's with the kids' toys. But yeah, of course it was on the 5th floor. And then when we got up there, we saw that a few other sort of Western tourists wandering around the Pokemon Center, which was a good find. And I'd highly recommend checking out Pokemon Center if anyone ever is in Japan, because it is a huge thing culturally. I've been shocked. I've seen so much Pikachu everywhere. It's crazy. Like, you think that Mario is like, he's the official mascot for the Olympics and everything. You think he'd be plastered around a bit more, but nope. Like, Pikachu is just easily the number one icon everywhere. I'd say even followed by something like a Dragon Quest slime. That's probably the next most popular like mascot I've seen everywhere. What you wanting to say, Caroline?
I was going to say, or Stacey Lou, friends with, what's his name? The bear?
Duffy.
Duffy the bear.
Which are just like two created Disney characters that I've never heard of, which
popular.
But are very popular and they're everywhere. So yeah, that was the Pokemon Center. Overall, Kyoto was great. I'd highly recommend staying in Gion. It's also near loads of shrines that are just walking distance away, which is really nice.
Yeah, which was why I was interested in it in the first place, because it's sort of supposed to be the area that's still really traditional. So there were some really beautiful streets that must be how the buildings used to be, and we saw loads of women dressed up either in the rental kimonos, which is a really big thing, or actually dressed up as geishas. So they still work as geishas with all the makeup and everything. So that was quite fun. Oh, and we saw these poor guys that were rickshaw runners. They would run around with these rickshaws, with two people rickshaws behind them in 30-degree heat with like 80% humidity. It was insane.
And they'd be in like dungarees and like thick black dungarees that just absorb the heat of the sun. Oh god, it looked horrible.
And can I say it was almost exclusively Japanese people that were making these guys run around carrying them?
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, Kyoto, a lot less built up than somewhere like Tokyo and Osaka. It's really noticeable, and it's nice, but the downside of that is that the public transport is a bit more awkward. But there's still a metro, there's still plenty of buses. We made it work.
Oh, and we should mention the bikes, because in my guidebook, it had this little box, we've been using the Lonely Planet, and it just said like, things to be aware of to make your stay in Kyoto more comfortable. And one was like, to always look both ways whenever you exit a shop or anywhere for bikes. And like, they were not exaggerating. The bikes were such a menace. And it feels really in contrast to how Japanese people seem to behave in general, where they're super conscientious and like, you know, don't want to inconvenience other people or get in the way. And then on bikes, they're absolute menaces. They're like, they don't even stick to the correct side of the road. They're on the pavement. They're just, they were in our faces all the time.
Yeah, it was quite frustrating. I'd also say the taxi drivers are quite fast and aggressive. They drive these very wide traditional cars pretty fast down the side streets, so definitely look out for those.
Yeah.
But overall, yeah, Kyoto was fantastic. That is a wrap on Kyoto, I think. We'll have to return one day. But yeah, Kyoto, the home of Nintendo, was great to see. And I mentioned this when we went to Kyoto from Odawara, that I was really gutted I couldn't see Mount Fuji from the Shinkansen, from the bullet train on the journey there. Because according to my map, it was like right beside us, and the whole way there I couldn't see it. So on the way back from Kyoto to Tokyo today, I can gladly say we actually saw Mount Fuji. And when I say saw, it's very rare to see the top of Mount Fuji because it has to be completely clear, and basically clouds always gather around it. So even though the majority of the sky was blue skies today, it was still, the top of Mount Fuji was still covered in cloud. But we were sort of hammering and hawing for a while whether what we were looking at was Mount Fuji, but then it became more and more clear that, oh yeah, that it's that massive mountain that just sort of it stands alone, separate to any other ranges nearby. And all the ranges nearby have like trees and stuff like right to the summit, whereas Mount Fuji is just completely barren. Like there's no trees on it at all. It's far more volcanic, I guess you could argue. I part of me wants to even say Mount Fuji is a dormant volcano, but I don't know if that's true, so don't quote me on it, but I'll need to look that up. But it totally could be, and I know that Japan's got absolutely loads of active volcanoes as well as dormant ones, as well as extinct ones, which I'm sure the other mountains were or are. But yeah, that's a bit of a wrap. We're now back in Tokyo, like I said, travelling back to Brussels tomorrow. I hope you have enjoyed our ramblings and our audio logs. I think this is the 5th segment we've done, so if you've made it this far, congratulations. You must really like to hear about Japan. Caroline, what's your sign off? What's a big thought that you want to say at the end of this journey?
No pressure. Well, first of all, I was just gonna plug my Instagram if anyone was.
Caroline's jumped on the opportunity. Give her a bit of publicity. She takes a mile. So here we go, Caroline. Where can people follow you on Instagram?
My handle is at Caroline Runs 26.2. It is mostly running focused, but if you liked this audio log, there are quite a few pictures from our trip that's there as well. And when it comes to just about Japan,
Our hike?
oh yeah, I would say our hike of Mount Kentucky was my overall #1 experience. I've never been somewhere so like lush, and then all of the bird song and seeing the 6 different toads and the old lady in the refuge at the top, who I like to call the mountain spirit. That was just like a completely unique and wonderful experience. That's definitely my #1.
I think mine has been possibly the crazy areas of both Tokyo and Osaka in terms of density, but in terms of just stuff when it came to like video games and food and sushi and just that real city culture of just, we're just going to throw it all at you and it's actually all really good value and we want you to come back for more. And like I really enjoyed that vibe, and of course Kyoto and seeing Nintendo HQ so close to the shrines and things was pretty cool to see. And like Kyoto definitely did feel incredibly different to the other cities we saw, as well as Nara, which felt very traditional as well. But yeah, I think that's about it for now. You can of course follow me. I'm at Ballyman91 on Twitter. I've been posting loads of photos, so do definitely go back on my timeline to see everything we've done throughout the trip, as well as our video logs, our vlogs I should say, where I think we've done 7 if you include the one we're about to do later tonight. I'd highly recommend checking that out if you want something a bit more vibrant and visual perhaps than images or an audio log, so definitely check that out. But until I return to Japan, I think this is me signing off. So thank you so much for sticking around. And Caroline, thank you so much for joining me, both on this holiday and exposing yourself to the TNL following. Have you got anything you'd like to say to them?
No, just...
No, she's just shy and just happy to be here. But happy to be here indeed. So with that, I think we are going to go get some... Let me get this name right. Some okonomiyaki. Okonomiyaki. And for those who don't know, that is like a Japanese... It's like an omelette, but
noodles.
With an omelette with noodles, eggs, and then you only put seafood and pork and chicken and sauce on top. And mayonnaise. It's lovely. So we're going to go for that for dinner. We will see you guys soon. Hopefully... some of you are interested in now going to Japan. So yeah, we're definitely coming back. We can tell you that much for free. But yeah, this is Bally signing off. So see you guys soon.
It's not a game, I'm not a robot, and I challenge you. I'm not a phantom, I'm in your face and I'm here to see it through. Right before your eyes, watch us multiply. Got the samurai, it's time. I'm the power.
The musical interludes used on today's show were Shokugeki no Souma Opening, copyright Sentai Filmworks 2015, Feel from Tokyo Mirage Sessions, copyright Atlas 2015, Nevermore from Persona 4, copyright Atlas 2008, Life Will Change from Persona 5 Golden, copyright Atlas 2016, Reincarnation from Tokyo Mirage Sessions, copyright Atlas 2015, and finally Crossing Fields from Sword Art Online, copyright Aniplex 2014.